Hello and welcome to Act 1, Episode 5 of Playdate. Today, me and Katie are reading the Shakespearean classic, Much Ado About Nothing.
Well, what's it about, Julia?
Nothing! I'm kidding.
Yes, indeed.
Well, we have to do trivia time first, and then we'll get into that fun stuff. All right. Do you want to go first, Katie? Do you want to kick us right off?
Yeah, sure. Let's go ahead. This one is pretty basic, but I don't talk about Shakespeare a lot, so I don't know if you'll know the answer. I think you will, but I could be wrong. So, my question to all of you out there, and Julia, is which is my favorite Shakespearean show? And here are your choices. Number 1, A Midsummer Night's Dream. Number 2, Cymbeline. Number 3, The Merry Wives of Windsor. And number 4, Macbeth.
It is the Scottish play.
Indeed, yes. Indeed, you are correct. Yes.
Which surprised me.
It's a pretty easy one if you know me, because that's like the only play that I know pretty intricately.
Yeah. I feel like the more in-depth you get with a Shakespeare show, the more you like it. 9
Absolutely.
times out of 10.
Oh, I completely agree. Completely. Well, that one seemed like that was pretty easy for you, Julia, so let's watch me fail and crash and burn at yours.
So this one, I'm going to be honest, Katie, I was really lazy. I didn't come up with anything Shakespeare, because I already did on the Instagram, so I was I'll just go take a hard left into a different territory. So this is a multiple choice question.
Okay.
Which of the following foods/drinks has Julia not eaten or drank as a part of a performance?
Oh, God. Okay.
A, iced tea. B, pecan pie. C, grape juice. Or D, a burrito.
You've definitely eaten a burrito because I watched that happen. You've definitely eaten a pecan pie because I've watched that happen. So that leaves the other two, iced tea and grape juice. Grape juice just feels so weird. So I'm going to say iced tea. I'm going to say that iced tea is the one you have.
You are incorrect. I drank iced tea that was supposed to be like whiskey in One Slight Hitch.
You know, it was a 50-50 chance because grape juice looks like wine, iced tea looks like whiskey.
And it's the most unconvincing performance I've ever given because at the time of the show, I had not had alcohol before. So I chugged it like any 16-year-old would. There'd be no reaction to drinking straight whiskey.
Well, I don't know if you were there the first time I drank whiskey, but it just went down the hatch. Just not
Do you want to tell our lovely viewers where you saw me eat a burrito? Like, what performance that was?
Yes, you ate a burrito during Florida Man, which was a choreo project that our lovely friend Noelle did. We took that class our senior year, right?
Yeah,
that was senior year.
She's gonna be thrilled that we are giving her a shout out on the podcast. Noelle, I know you're listening.
Yes,
and this
Noelle,
one's just for you, baby girl.
It was about like all of the different weird things that happen in Florida and all those weird headlines you hear, and one of those things just involved Julia literally eating a burrito at like 10 o'clock in the morning, a choreo final from Taco Bell.
I pulled it out of my fanny pack and ate the entire thing on stage.
And that statement right there, Julia Marie Black pulling out a taco, a burrito from her fanny pack, is all you need to know about Julia.
You should have seen the Taco Bell employee's face when we rolled up there at 8:30 a.m. on a Thursday.
Yeah.
And we were like, hi, can we have 2 burritos and a Baja Blast?
Honestly, though, Taco Bell in college was like our go-to place.
Oh my gosh.
So that makes sense.
When I did summer stock, I had Taco Bell legit every day of the week.
Every day. After Daisy Pulls It Off in particular, which was a play we did our sophomore year, Julia and I were in together.
Yep.
There's one performance in particular I remember. There was like a train of 6 different cars from people who were in Daisy Pulls It Off in the drive-thru of Taco Bell. And we all were like waving at each other like, great show tonight. Let's get some tacos.
We used to always roll up to like any meeting because because we were in the theater program, we had a lot of meetings that started at 10 p.m. at night.
Yes.
And you bet your bosom that if I had any free time before said meeting, I was at Taco Bell getting a snack.
And it just feels right, honestly.
Yeah. And with all that, we will take a short break and be back with our breakdown of Much Ado About Nothing.
All right, Julia. So, we are here to discuss Willie Shakes and his incredible play, Much Ado About Nothing. So, my question for you, Julia, is what the heck is this show about?
Well, Katie, you won't find any short synopsis of this show on the interwebs. So I went to every 10th grader's best friend, SparkNotes.
It sure was mine, I'll tell you that.
So this is a long one, everyone. Strap in. I'm basically going to tell you everything that happens in Much Ado About Nothing. Get ready. Leonardo, a kindly, respectable nobleman, lives in the idyllic Italian town of Messina. Leonardo shares his house with his lovely young daughter, Hero, his playful, clever niece, Beatrice, and his elderly brother, Antonio, who is Beatrice's father. As the play begins, Leonardo prepares to welcome some friends home from a war. The friends include Don Pedro, a prince who is a close friend of Leonardo, and two fellow soldiers, Claudio, a well-respected young nobleman, and Benedict, a clever man who constantly makes witty jokes, often at the expense of his friends. Don John, Don Pedro's illegitimate brother, is a part of the crowd as well. Don John is sullen and bitter, and makes trouble for the others. When the soldiers arrive at Leonardo's home, Claudio quickly falls in love with Hero. Meanwhile, Benedict and Beatrice resume the war of witty insults that they've carried on with each other in the past. Claudio and Hero pledge their love to one another and decide to be married. To pass the time the week before the wedding, the lovers and their friends decide to play a game. They want to get Beatrice and Benedict, who are clearly meant for each other, to stop arguing and fall in love. Their tricks prove successful, and Beatrice and Benedict soon fall secretly in love with each other. But Don John has decided to disrupt everyone's happiness. He has his companion Baraccio make love to Margaret, Hero's serving woman, at Hero's window in the darkness of the night, and he brings Don Pedro and Claudio to watch. Believing that he has seen Hero being unfaithful to him, the enraged Claudio humiliates Hero by suddenly accusing her of lechery on the day of their wedding and abandoning her at the altar. Hero's stricken family members decide to pretend that she died suddenly of shock and grief to hide her away while they wait for the truth about her innocence to come out. In the aftermath of the rejection, Benedict and Beatrice finally confess their love to one another. Fortunately, the night watchmen overhear Baraccio bragging about his crime. Dogberry and Vergis, the head of the local police, ultimately arrest both Baraccio and Conrad, another of Don John's followers. Everyone learns that Hero is really innocent, and Claudio, who believes she is dead, grieves for her. We're almost done, guys. We're almost there. Leonardo tells Claudio that, as punishment, he wants Claudio to tell everybody in the city how innocent Hero was. He also wants Claudio to marry Leonardo's niece, a girl who he says looks much like the dead Hero. Claudio goes to the church with the others, preparing to marry the mysterious masked woman who he thinks is Hero's cousin. When Hero reveals herself as the masked woman, Claudio is overwhelmed with joy. Benedict then asks Beatrice if she will marry him, and after some arguing, they agree. The joyful lovers all have a merry dance before they celebrate their double wedding. The end of every Shakespearean comedy.
Yes, indeed. You know, I think my favorite part of that synopsis is the fact that they in this particular version, they wanted to point out that it's not just that they wanted to fake her death. Instead, they wanted to fake her death because it would be less shameful than anything else that happened.
Than her having bodily autonomy.
Then literally, it just is chef's kiss.
I love it so much. Every time I see Benedict's name, I don't know if you do this, but every time I see Benedict's name in print, I just go, he Benedict, but he's better now. I don't know if that was Shakespeare's intent. To be like, guys, he may have been a dick.
Honestly, though, the fact that his name ends with a K instead of a C, you know, like Benedict versus with the C. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but it's pretty.
I think it might be.
It's a convincing argument. I'll say that.
He Benedict, but he's okay now.
And truly, that's the statement to take away from the evening. So, Julia, what's your history with this play?
It's one of those plays that, you know, it's Shakespeare, so you just kind of know about it. But the first time I saw it was at Fredonia our sophomore year. Yeah, our sophomore year. And I painted the tiles that were used on the stage. Ooh. It was a very nice marble paint thing. It was lovely. And I'm assuming that's probably when you also saw it. Much Ado About Nothing.
Yeah. I saw it actually I think a summer or two earlier, but I did not know I didn't know it. Nor did I try to understand it in any way. I saw it in like the park, at a, you know, town a couple of miles from me. And then I saw it at Fredonia, in which I was on load crew for. So I got to load that beautiful build and nice. Load that beautiful set in, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful set. It was very pretty. But yeah, I've seen that twice. But honestly, I even after kind of doing the in-depth research on this show, I don't really have any feelings about it. To be 100% honest, it really is about nothing.
The title really says it all.
It really does, yeah. I mean, like, obviously things happen, but at the end, you don't leave, really, besides feeling happier, like, you don't leave gaining anything. You really just watch people run around for about 2.5 hours, just kind of chasing each other.
It's a fun romp.
Which I think is one of the beauty. Yeah, I think that's one of the beauties of Shakespeare's comedies, truly, is that he doesn't really try to add, like, too much else into it. Besides just the entertaining elements to it. Like, he really doesn't try to add in too much excessive drama that's gonna turn it into a dramedy, unless that's what he's going for. He really, if it's comedy, he sticks to comedy, and it's great because it really just can put you in such a good mood after seeing one of his shows done so well, you know?
Yeah. It's always interesting to me that, like, when they went through that 90s, early 2000s trend of, like, remaking Shakespearean classics into, like, modern high school things, that they didn't touch this one. I think because, like, it doesn't have too much of a plot aside from the enemies to lovers trope that we all know and love. I mean, they may not have invented it, but Beatrice and Benedict are the embodiment of that trope.
Yes, they are.
But you didn't have, like, a 10 Things I Hate About You or She's the Man of this one. At least not to my knowledge.
Right. No, yeah. Not to mine either. I agree. Yeah.
I did realize after reading it, though, that I want a show about... Because you know how in Shakespeare there's, like, a million characters named Balthazar? Like, that name comes up all the time. I just want a play that is all of the Balthazars sitting in a room talking about all the shit they've seen. Just like this one guy. Listen, there was this girl and we thought she was dead and her husband thought she was dead, but then she woke up after he died because he thought she was dead, and then she killed herself again. Like, it was crazy, man. Like, I just want to see a bunch of Balthazars.
When are you gonna write a show that's like a 70s conversation pit with some Balthazars with, you know, like a nice glass of whiskey sitting there and being like, you think you saw it? Let me tell you, you haven't seen half of it, brother. And here it is. I'm waiting, that. Julia. Yeah, well, as for the man himself, William Shakespeare, he is obviously super incredible, so I'm not going to take any more time out of this podcast to really talk about who he was or the things that he did. If you are interested, I think you should be, I think you should stop this podcast right now and go back to last week's short release of a little bit of who the man was, who William Shakespeare is as a person, as a playwright, as a human being. if he even was a real human being.
Da, da, da.
Dun, dun, dun. And then you should come on back and take a listen to the second half of this episode. But he's an incredible man, and I don't want to cut that short. So yeah. So with that, why don't we just go into some of the thoughts that we had about this play?
Sure. So my most recent reading, I told you about this before we got on the podcast, but you lovely listeners get to hear it here too. So I'm one of those people who I can't just like straight read Shakespeare unless I'm doing like book work for a show where I'm like going through and scanning lines and paraphrasing and doing all the book work. So for this I was like, okay, I'll need to like listen to people saying these lines out loud in order to like fully comprehend what I'm reading. And so I found, just like, because it's public domain, I was like, oh, there's gotta be productions on YouTube. So I go and I find one. And it was by Texas Shakespeare Company. Woo! They're awesome. And
woo, we love them.
We love them. They're great. And
they're wonderful.
As I'm listening, I'm like, wow, the guy who's playing Benedict sounds so familiar to me. Why? Like, I wonder what he's done. So I look in the credits. He was my fight director for Romeo and Juliet.
That he was.
The incredibly talented Luke Eddy. Go check him out. He's a fight director, actor, just amazing human being. Super cool dude. And he's very good in this performance that I watched. But that was just so... The world of Shakespeare is a small one, my friends. It's a very small world.
And also, I did not watch that production. I did a very similar technique when sort of breaking this show down, because I'm a slow reader no matter what. Put a Shakespeare play in front of me and it's going to take 100 years. So I sort of did the same thing, kind of found like a video and followed along in my script, took notes, that sort of thing, read along while I was reading it. And I did not watch that production, but if any of you are unfamiliar with the work that Texas Shakespeare Company does, please look at them, because they are remarkable. They are a remarkable company. I don't remember which exact version that I watched, but just initially going off of the text, I've got a question for you, Julia, because I was really tossing and turning, and I could not figure out how I would want to see this done, and I just was curious about your thoughts. So Beatrice, right? Strong, feisty woman in this show. Truly, give no shit, take no shit type of character.
Yeah.
And at the same time, she's a give all shit, take all shit kind of person.
She cares so much, guys.
She cares so much, but she puts up this defensive wall, obviously, so that nobody will see through it. But I just think that her and Hero are so completely opposite, as they should be, and opposites are a big thing in Shakespeare. But I really want to see, like, the sloppiness, like, whatever you would see as, like, a typical Shakespearean ingenue, like, the absolute opposite of that is what I want to see Beatrice being. But because she's so important to the text itself, I don't want any of that, like, sloppiness, so to say, I say that in air quotes, to come out through the text. I want that sort of non-feminine side of her to come out in other ways. And I really, I saw it in the costumes, and I saw it in the actor I was watching in her physicalization of it. I can read it in the play when I'm reading the words on the page, but I just don't feel like it's enough to accurately convey how different she should be from Hero. And I don't know, without making any kind of alterations to the text, because that's the most important part, how to get that into, like, the right playing space. And I didn't know if you had any ideas kind of on that. It's a kind of a complex question to start us out with.
It is a complex
but I'm
question.
super curious.
I like it, though. I wouldn't necessarily say that Beatrice is, like, unfeminine per se. Is manic femme a term? Can we make it a term?
yeah.
Because
sure.
I identify with both of them in many cases, because, like, I too, like Hero, I'm quite melodramatic in my daily life. I'm not saying that she's overreacting, because she's definitely not overreacting to being accused of adultery on her wedding day. Not of saying course. That at all. But she's a very sweet figure, and she likes the drama. And then Beatrice is like, I get her. I really do. Because I'm the type of person who will be like, yeah, I don't need no man. I'm so done with games and all this stuff. And then a guy will be like, wait, so you like me? And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
What? No, I never said that. Why would you say that?
Like, honestly, let's be real. I identify with Benedict a lot in this show. Maybe more than I do Beatrice. The line where he says, when I said I thought I would die a bachelor, I did not think I should live till I were married. Like, that line is very much like me being like, yeah, I'm single and ready to mingle. And then it's like the person I like is like, hey. And I'm like, oh, hello.
Hello, would you like to learn more about bees? I can give you this bee pamphlet that I have right next to me.
I mean, yes, but substitute bees with bananas, and that's exactly how that conversation would go.
Yes. Total side note, but one of the first 3 conversations I ever had with Julia, she told me a bunch of facts about people who worked in the banana industry. She had to do a report on it in English, and that's like my most prominent memory of Julia. And I use those facts as fun facts to this day.
That you have of me.
I do.
See, that's where manic femme is just being like in a million. And that's the thing. I like Shakespeare a lot. He doesn't always do it, but sometimes he's just really good at writing women. More so than a lot of people of his time, I find. Like, Juliet is my girl. Like, she, like, the entire time Romeo is like, oh my god, babe, I just want to love you forever. And she's like, okay, but, like, when are we getting married? When is this happening? Please give me a calendar. Okay, but
commit to me.
Right, like, she's like, we need organization. I appreciate that you want to make out right now, but also, if we're planning on getting married, like, there's a lot we have to consider.
She's like, got some Rachel Berry in her.
She does, but, like, in a not annoying way. Like, she's like me at a PAC
the best
meeting.
Qualities.
Where I'm like, do we have a Google folder for that? Did we CC blah 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 on that email? Like,
exactly.
That, like, it's that kind of that almost subversion of expectations. I know we're jumping over to Romeo and Juliet land, but it's just, I like it, guys. So, but, like, Romeo's just a very, like, poetic, romantic guy, and she's over here like, okay, but, like, when are we getting this done? Like, who do we have to talk to? And I, like, you kind of see that with Benedict and Beatrice a little bit, because Benedict's the first to get giggly, for lack of a better term. Like, as soon as he's like, wait, Beatrice likes me, oh, I like her too. And, like, that's a cute subversion that we don't see very often. I think the most recent iteration might be, like, Peter Kavinsky from To All the Boys I've Loved Before, where he's like, yeah, we're gonna be a fake couple. And then he's like, but why don't you like me?
But why isn't this working out the way I wanted it to?
But why don't you love me for realsies?
I agree. I think that this could be controversial, and I've always said that in the Scottish play, I think Lady M and Macbeth are the best there in terms of, like, contrasting love interests in a Shakespearean play. But my second is definitely Benedict and Beatrice. I think that they are, like, such a good romantic pairing that Shakespeare puts together here in this play. I want to see every single version of Benedict and Beatrice in, like, every single play, because I think you can do it so differently in each, and I think above all, the chemistry between those two actors, whoever they are, is, like, the most important part of making this show super duper duper successful.
They make and break the show. Like, if you have a bad pairing, there's no reason to watch. I know that sounds really harsh, but it's true. Like, the chemistry has to be there. And the thing that Shakespeare does, which is just so freaking brilliant, is, so iambic pentameter is meant to mimic a heartbeat. And that has a lot of, like, symbolism in terms of, like, the religion of the time and stuff like that. But what you'll see is if Shakespeare ships two of the characters of his own creation, he will make them finish each other's sentences and finish each other's iambic pentameter. And you see this,
and he does that with his villains as well.
Yes, he does it with his villains.
They hate each other enough.
We're hopping back to Romeo and Juliet again. Sorry, but like when they first meet, they basically recite a sonnet together, because they say together a complete sonnet that's also a conversation, and you see it with Lady M and M, when all of their conversations are in like perfect verse. They are written to be the most compatible couple in play history, and you see it a lot with Benedict and Beatrice.
It's the Miss Lovett and Sweeney Todd, but the more compatible version of that.
Yeah, it's like if Sweeney Todd actually liked Mrs. Lovett, and they were like, let's do murder together in a cute coupley way.
They said just a cute little murder as a tree.
Just as a tree, and then we can eat pie.
Yeah, I get it. I'm just gonna say right off the bat here, my favorite character, I know it's super duper weird, is Don John. I love Don John because I think that he is like, Don John is one of the villains per se of this play. Yeah. He is like the villain really. But he just gives off some major Mojo Jojo vibes here. Mojo Jojo is the villain in the Powerpuff Girls. He's a monkey, and he just is running around trying to, like, you know, ruin them, and he's like, darn, those Powerpuff Girls always getting me. Very Scooby-Doo-esque, and I feel that a little bit with Don John's character, because I think you just have to, if you don't have a goofy villain for this character, again, in the same vein as you said before with, you know, Beatrice and Benedict, like, why are we even watching? Yeah. If you can't have, like, a goofy Shakespearean villain, because, you know, I kind of bring this point up later in my notes, but, you know, one of the things, and as I said earlier, like, if it's a comedy, it's going to be a comedy, unless he wants it to be a melodrama or a dramedy, whatever you call it, you know, it's going to be a comedy or it's going to be a drama. And so if you play like that character of Don John like too villainy with not enough like goofiness and lightheartedness in it, it's going to make it like more difficult to watch, because you should know it's a comedy, everything's going to work out in the end, so you almost just kind of want to see them like struggle with the power a little bit, I think, between the villains and the heroes. And I just want to see like the goofiest Don John that we've ever seen, even while still having some elements of truth there of like really pertaining, like having a full threat to them. But I just don't want to think that he can be successful from the beginning. As an audience member reading it, that's what I want. And maybe that my intention would, and I hope it would change as the actor, but as the audience member, I just kind of want to enjoy seeing what's going to happen as opposed to being nervous of what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think there's two very different directions you can go with it. You can go with full goof, full melodrama, full Hank Azaria in Night at the Museum too. Or you can go like Loki energy, where it's like, I've got all the cards and I'm smooth talking, you know, clever man, and I'm gonna make them fall for it. Like, that's fun to watch too, because you're like, oh, it's so fun to watch and mess with them. Like, they have no idea what's coming.
Right.
So I feel like those two are like the strongest. Like, the worst thing you can have in a Shakespearean comedy is a boring antagonist. Because I wouldn't say he's a villain. Right. He's not like Iago levels of mischievous, but he is like he's a bad drama.
Right, like he's a bad villain. Yeah. He's not your stereotypical, and I think that's kind of what I was trying to say, is like he's a villain who, you know, is like not gonna be successful. Yeah. No matter how much drama he tries to cause, you know?
Oh my gosh, I love it. It's so funny. Maybe it was the version I was watching, but I kept on drawing parallels to Pride and Prejudice. Because
there are a lot.
In the version I watched, they were all wearing, like, the empire waist dresses, and the guy, like, literally, the soldiers were wearing basically exactly what Wickham wears in the 2005 Pride and Prejudice. And I was just like, I never realized, like, a lot of these characters are kind of the same character in both of those things. Like, I feel like Jane and Bingley are Claudio and Hero, except, like, Bingley's a little puppy dog and less of a prick. But
what's the difference between Much Ado About Nothing and Pride and Prejudice? That.
The prick. And I mean, like, Benedict's a huge extrovert, whereas Mr. Darcy is pointedly not.
Yes.
But, I mean, Lizzie Bennet and Beatrice, they would have a good time out on the town, I feel.
I would agree. I would have to agree. I think that would be a pretty fun night out on the town. I also think you're right. I think especially that, I feel like both of us are probably most familiar with that specific version of Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
But there are a lot in, I feel like almost weirdly any Shakespearean comedy that you can draw. Maybe not every single one, but in particular the two most famous Shakespearean comedies of probably Much Ado and Midsummer Night's Dream. You can definitely draw some comparisons there in both senses, and I think that has to do with probably just the fact that there are multiple lovers and, you know,
I mean, some
all
people
of that
call
fun stuff.
Much Ado like Love's Labour's Lost Part 1, you know, like, the stock characters are so and I mean, it's because they work. Like, I'm a sucker for enemies to lovers. I'm writing that right now in one of my plays. Like, we all enjoy it. And, like, we love this idea of, like, people pretending to be someone else. Like, there's a reason this stuff is funny. Like, my playwriting teacher will often say, comedy is the situation. And that is no more... Because these are just people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's the situation that makes it funny.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you have to be under the assumption that these people are just funny all of the time. And that we're just catching a glimpse in the few days that we have been gifted to, like, view in and specifically narrow in on what's going on in their lives. But you have to assume that the day before this play was written and the day after this play was written, there's the same level of comedy, and they don't build up to it or decline from it, really.
Yeah, it's just watching all of these characters and their desires collide. That's just so... And I mean, that's why a lot of comedy especially is, like, surrounded around a big event, like a wedding or a funeral or whatever, because it's just funny things happen at events. Like, how many of us have a weird wedding story or a graduation story or whatever? It's because, you know, it's the expectation that comes with events can breed disappointment and breed comedy, because...
I would argue that it almost always does. You know, like, I feel like even in the wonderful events that have happened in my life, we all have such a strong vision of what we expect an event to look like or what we expect to take away from an event. And it's very rare that you're going to get that right on the nose with your expectations. And if you have high expectations, no fingers pointed at me or Julia, but if you have high expectations for things, it, like, lends itself to disappointment, which lends itself to good comedy. You know, even when the events are so wonderful, just because, not even because they're bad, they're just not what you expected. You know.
Yeah.
One of the things that I wrote here that I would just love to do, like, from... Everybody always gets asked, kind of, if you were to sit down with, like, actors, directors, playwrights, choreographers, who would it be and why? And I think one of the things that I would love to do is sit down with two different actors, one who plays Beatrice and one who plays Hero, and I want to hear about what they did during the table work portion of their rehearsal process to create a relationship with each other. And table work is, you see it in a lot of shows, but especially Shakespearean shows. It's usually at the very beginning of the rehearsal process where everybody literally sits at a table and you take notes and you figure things out and you try to come up with relationships and you try to dissect the text and figure out what's going on. And in a typical professional company, you usually have, a week to a couple of weeks really to sit down and kind of try and get to the nitty-gritty of like what your character is and what their involvement is in the story, what's going on with the story in general, so that everybody knows what's happening. Because obviously when these plays were written, they were written at a time that this was how people talked, and it's not anymore. And that's what is the biggest disconnect between contemporary performers and Shakespeare, is that it's just so hard for you to get into the text. But I would just love to sit down with somebody who played Beatrice and somebody who played Hero and ask them things like, what are your go-to mannerisms? What is your character's vocal speed? What is your character's vocal grit? How are the way that they sit, the way that they eat, their morning routine? What do they have for, in their coffee if they were in modern day? What's their alcoholic drink of choice? Like, I feel like all of those things for those two characters are so important because they have to be opposite. At least in what I want to see from this production, which can vary from person to person, but I want to see them being the absolute opposite, because I think the biggest takeaway in this play for me is that literally anybody and everybody can find love, and can find a love that is perfect for them. And in order to play on that, because that's what I would want the audience to take away, I want to give them the opposites, and I want to give them the absolute opposite everything to show that you can be completely different and still find your way in life and find the thing that you want and that you love. And so for me, I just think that that's a super duper duper important part of the process. I don't know what you think, but
yeah, that's beautiful. I don't ever intend to direct much ado in my life. Like, I don't think this would be my Shakespeare show to direct of choice. But I think, like, if I was put in the position where it's like, you have to direct much ado, what are you going to do about it? It would be very much, the physical comedy is what matters to me in this. Like, this play has so much potential for physical comedy, but it has to be physical comedy that plays with the words, because the words are just chef's kiss in this. Like, there were so many times where I didn't write a note for this, I just wrote a quote from it, like, if we can do this, Cupid is no longer an archer. So good. Like, we still say Brilliant. Things like this today, and that's where, the text is different, the text is stylized, but it's all human sentiments. It's all, like, versions of stuff we say now. I think, like, the thing that you want to tap into is the humanity behind all these characters, because you want them to be relatable. You want those moments of, like, I love you so much, what do you want, what you want me to do for you? I'll do anything. Kill Claudio. Like, like, those moments of
kill it.
Just absurdity have to be so sincere. And we've talked about this before, like, the more sincere it is, the more it lands, because it's just, you can tell the characters fully believe what they are saying. And when you are in love, you act a little crazy and you make crazy choices. You're like, I could drop $500 for a plane ticket to go see. Yeah, I could definitely do that. Like, there's always that, like, comedic trope of, like, oh, we got our dream wedding destination, let's move the wedding up 2 years. Right. Like, people do crazy things when it comes to love, and I think just, like, really playing up the absurdity of this, because I mean, it really goes back, we talked about Commedia with The Illusion, but Commedia characters are the characters that we are seeing in this show. These stock characters have persisted through time. We have the father, we have the lovers, we have the Zannis, we have everyone messing around. Like, Dogberry, my boy Dogberry, is the most Zanni that ever could Zanni.
At this podcast here at Playdate, we love Dogberry.
We love Dogberry. Yeah. We love Dogberry big time. And the best part is, like, he doesn't show up until halfway through. And he's the reason that the whole thing gets figured out, even though he literally does nothing to further the plot other than that.
There are so many times that Shakespeare does that, where he just says, you know what, I'm kind of bored. It's time to throw in somebody new. And you throw in somebody, and quite a few plays do this, and I think that I'd be interested to know how much of that has been subconsciously taken from Shakespeare, just throwing in and whipping in a new character out of nowhere who comes on stage for 2 seconds and then isn't there anymore. And in Shakespeare world, 30 minutes on stage is 2 seconds on stage. So, like, you know, seeing that kind of come into play, I just would be so curious. So many people do that now in plays, and they always turn out to be, like, the most important character, or the one that, like, brings in something completely different, fixes something somehow. And even though, like, Dogberry doesn't really, like, advance the plot, per se, they do, you know? So they don't, but they do.
I mean, even some of the, in my opinion, the funniest moments in Shakespeare happen in the tragedies, because he always sticks a comedic character in the tragedies. Like, my favorite, by far, I will do this monologue before I die, but it's the gatekeeper in the Scottish play, where he's like, you know, there are times that are up and there are times that are down. And if done well, this character will have a belt and can be motioning with the belt if things are up or down. And because as we know, based on Benedict's name, dicks are everywhere in Shakespeare. That's why it's funny. They're everywhere.
And that is the quote of the night. Julia is just serving us these good quotes tonight.
I've got real crackhead energy tonight, Katie. I'll be perfectly honest. I came out here, I was like, all right.
You took...
It's our April Fool's episode.
I have two... It is our April Fool's episode. It's okay. I have 2 points. I'm showing Julia this on her screen, which you can't see. But I have 2 points here that are in bold and underlined. And point number 1 here is physicalization of the text, and point 2 is comparing it to Commedia, which you did in both of your points, which is hilarious because we're on the exact same page. I agree. I think physicalization is, like, so important here, because the audience does. You can assume that the audience does not know pretty much what's going on about 75 to 80% of the time. Because most of the people sitting in the audience are not actors. Maybe there's 25%, you know, are theater goers and theater makers, and are familiar with Shakespeare's work, but you have to assume that most of the people there, like, don't really know what's going on. And especially in a comedy, like, you have that opportunity that you don't get in a Shakespearean drama to really play into the physical nature of it, to be able to show them, like, what is happening, even when they don't know what's happening. For example, when Hero is, like, super duper happy because her and Claudio are, you know, they're gonna be married and everything is gonna be wonderful, and then she's accused of adultery and the world turns to shit, you know, you as the audience member, like, you want to see that physical change of, like, how does she sit when she's in love versus how does she sit when she, like, thinks that the world is gonna collapse. So what can we learn as an audience member just by taking away or adding in that physicalization that you might not get to see in, like, a Shakespearean tragedy?
Yeah. And I mean, the comparison I always make, and this was the same for me the first time I saw a Shakespeare show performed live, the first 10 to 20 minutes, it's like watching a foreign film with subtitles. Because you're like, I know what those words mean. I don't know what they mean in that order. And it's like, it takes your brain a minute to acclimate to the text. And so it has to be very clear from the very beginning, you know, what's the energy? Who are these characters? How are they related to each other? And the audience will pick it up. It just takes a minute. And the thing that helps that is the physicality.
Yeah, and that is what makes good productions of Shakespeare good productions of Shakespeare. You know, is that, like, you can be watching it without the text in front of you and just know what they're doing right off of the bat and what is going on, even though it still might take you, like you said, like 15-20 minutes. That's pretty good. That's about 5 minutes of like any modern movie that you're watching. So you get that chance to like really get to know the intricacies. Like you said, what's the tone? What am I getting? What kind of energy am I getting from these people? Like, do I know if this is something that like I can release my shoulders and my jaw for, or is this something that I'm gonna be like really on the edge of my seat for the whole time? Good actors and good directors and good designers and good choreographers are what makes Shakespearean productions good.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing that it's odd because Shakespeare is like a musical in nature in a lot of ways, and a huge big part of that is just the level of disbelief, because when we watch a musical, we know that it's a set, we know that it's actors, we can see props being moved on and off stage, so it's not too weird if someone just burst into song, because it's like, well, we already see that everything's fake. And then, right, that's why movie musicals are a lot harder to pull off, because it's like, okay, is this diegetic? Is this not diegetic? Like, why are they breaking the fourth wall here? What's going on? It's why animated musicals are successful. Because our boy Howard Ashman was like, hey, if a talking crab can talk, a talking crab can sing. I had to drop Howard Ashman. Anyway. But of course, with Shakespeare, the level of disbelief is different, because the characters on some level are in cahoots with the audience and can have conversations with the audience. And that's what a soliloquy is. It's not necessarily a person just musing. Like, they are designed so that you are talking to the audience and being like, did you see what just happened? He likes me. Exactly. Oh my God. Like, that's the character's moment. And I mean, especially in the scene where they are, talking about Benedict and Beatrice, and Benedict is listening in, and then again when they do it with Beatrice, both Benedict and the audience are connected in that moment, because he's going, they're talking about Beatrice, they're talking about all this stuff. And by the same token, the men having a conversation are like, we know Benedict's sitting right there. Like, yeah. So they've got a relationship with the audience. And then the same thing happens again with Beatrice. So anytime that a character is on stage, they're not on a stage by themselves. Like, that's what makes Shakespeare villains so fun, because we as the audience are in on it. Because he's like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to mess their lives up so much. I'm going to drop that handkerchief in Cassio's bag, and Othello's going to freak out.
It's also just, and this is what makes Shakespeare so freaking remarkable, is that he did this when he was alive, probably not even knowing that his plays would last as long as they did. And he wrote that in. He wrote soliloquies into almost every show he's ever written, for the exact same reason we use it today, which is to help inform the audience of what's going on. Especially it happens at the end of scenes where things happen and then somebody's like, so here's a quick recap. This is what they think is going to happen. This is what this person wants me to do. But nay, I say, nay, this is what is going to happen. And they do it at the end of so many important events, and he does it in so many of his plays. And the guy probably didn't even frickin' know his plays would be around this long, and he's doing it anyway, and it is still helping us today convey his text to an audience without even needing anything besides what is given in his text. And to kind of go back for a minute to the episode that we did on Stage Kiss, this is kind of the point that I was alluding to of why I love things with no stage directions, because it gives this limitless possibility to anything that anybody wants to. You can take this play and say, we're just gonna completely clean slate it. I want to go in with white floors, white chairs, white ceilings, and I want to literally build it from the ground up, and there is nothing in there telling you can't do that otherwise. Yeah. And I just think that that's remarkable.
My favorite Shakespeare tidbit is that nowhere in Romeo and Juliet does it say anything about a balcony. which means that whoever was like, oh, this scene should take place on a balcony, that has persisted throughout time. And it's not even in the text. And, like, most of the time, the actors would only have the scenes that they were in, and that's why the couplets are at the end of scenes to signify, okay, if you're backstage, it's time for you to come on and do your scene. That was, like, their signal backstage to be like, oh, he's rhyming, gotta go out there. And, like,
and he does that in so many.
Yeah, and there isn't a lot of stage direction. It is written into the text, so we know based on the words, oh, someone was just slapped during this scene. Oh, she's got a knife. It doesn't say it in the text, or it doesn't say it in the stage directions. It says it in the text. And it gives you permission. And it also gives, permission to do these shows in different time periods and different settings, which I'm sure we'll get into when we talk about design. But it's I
was gonna say, that's such a good segue.
Yeah. Do you want to hop right in? I'm curious to know what you would do with it.
First things first, I'm just gonna repeat it on like every single episode. I hate doing theater in the proscenium.
What?
I just hate
no
it.
Way.
Way. I just hate it. I just think it separates the audience so much. But nevertheless, there are a couple of things here that I think really conflicted me that I wasn't expecting when I was coming up with this portion, which is the if I wanted to see it done in a modern way versus if I wanted to see it done in a traditional way. This is something that in today's, era, and for those of you who either might not be as familiar with Shakespeare or just are not as familiar with theater in general, is that sometimes we will take these texts that have been around for so long, try to revamp them with a little bit of like modern-esque elements, things that are going on in the world, even just in the way that their characters are portrayed, design elements, things like that, gender-blind casting, all sorts of things. And I really couldn't decide if I wanted to see this done in a modern version or if I wanted to see it more traditional, but I think I want to see it more traditional, which is very weird for me, because most Shakespearean shows I want to see done not traditional, because I think they're more interesting this way. But I want to see this show done outside, and I want to see it done in a 3/4 thrust in an amphitheater, and that is what I want to see it in. And obviously you can't have a thrust in an amphitheater, but we'll make it work. We'll figure it out.
There are ways. There are
ways around it, and I'm sure that there are amphitheaters out there with 3/4 thrust built in somehow. But an amphitheater is a theater that just is outdoors. But I think that you shouldn't, in my opinion, design elements. I don't want to see a lot of lighting here. I don't want to see a lot of sound effects. I don't really want to see a lot of any of that. What I want to see a lot of is costumes, and I want to see a lot of colors. In particular, I want to see matching colors with specific characters, but I don't want to see it on the whole costume. I want to see it on like one specific item of each costume. Like maybe shoes on Hero and a belt on Claudio. Things like that. Where the colors are matching, but everything else can kind of be as is. I just want there to be a couple of specific things to match each character or couple with their, associated partner or object, whatever it is. And so in particular, I have this vision at like the very, very end when Hero finally reveals herself to be like the true love for Claudio. I like want him to know that it's her without her having to reveal herself solely based on that color, and have the audience and him in on it, which is why I say shoes, so that if he is, looking down, if he's somber, which, you shouldn't do, but even if he's, looking out, he's looking for something, that he can see that, like, one color and, like, know that it's her almost before it happens, or hope that it's her before it happens. I also think props are going to be a big thing here, because whether you're doing it in the time that it happened or if you're doing it with a more modern take, I think it can really help set up class, intelligence, subtext. Like, it can set up so much for the audience without the audience really having to do much, and them just kind of picking up on it subconsciously, by knowing, like, if that person is we're talking a lot about whiskey, but that person's drinking a whiskey and they've got, like, you know, a cigar in their mouth. Like, they might be a little bit more high class than somebody who's drinking a lukewarm beer out of red Solo cup, which Julia and I have never done before. I also think that this show has a lot of gendered things in it. A lot of gendered things in it.
As most Shakespearean comedies
As most Shakespeare shows do. Specifically,
looking at you, Taming of the Shrew.
We're looking at you, we see you. But I think that what this show does so great, in particular with Beatrice's character, is breaking that. Completely breaking that and being like, no, like, I'm not just a piece of property. I am not here for you to do X, Y, and Z. And on the other hand, she gives that right back to Benedict, and he is quick to say, no, I'm not a piece of meat. I'm not what, you know what I mean? They are equally as bad at being gendered towards each other, as everybody is, but that couple in particular is very, very gendered in what they expect from their partner, with gender norms, gender roles, things like that. I think by using things like props and costumes, it gives another thing for the actors to work with. You know, like, a lot of times an actor, you can know exactly what they're doing based on the way that they're squeezing a towel. Like, maybe they're squeezing it super gently and they're, you know, stressed out, or maybe they're, like, really yanking that thing because they're mad. So, like, I just think that there's so much subtext that can be played out, and especially those moments where their gender norms are being brought into play, that props can have a really good influence at, like, quickly breaking that, which is why I think I want to see it done more traditionally, to see what ways you can bring out the positive effects of those gender norms.
I really like that. I would be I'm doing a completely different direction.
I love that. Let's hear what you got.
So I want it to be set, because the first thing I thought about was like, wow, this is really like first world problems. Like, this is just a very classic case of like something that would happen at like a college campus. Mm-hmm. Not that I want it to be set on a college campus. I would very much like it to be set at a country club, or like one of those like summer vacation resorts. Like from Dirty Dancing. I don't know if anyone knows what I'm talking about. But I want to really get that, like, these are just, like, a bunch of privileged people, you know, dealing with their, like, family and you know, relationship drama. And, yeah, I just really want to see it at a country club. And then that would give it a lot of, room for, like, I specifically pictured Benedict hiding under like a chaise lounge, like listening to them, and like Beatrice seeing people walk by and just holding a beach ball in front of her head, so they would see her.
Yeah, so she's like, wait, hide me.
Hide it, you know, so or like hiding behind like a beach umbrella or something like that. Yeah. But like, I want it to be that and a lot of people hold weddings at country clubs, so it just makes a lot of sense in terms of weddings and all of that going on.
My brother's wedding was at a country club, so yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. And then because like they have that guy who follows them around with the guitar and sings songs, I'm like, great, like you have a band that plays at the country club, and you're just like, oh man, sing us a song, here you go, we're just getting drinks at the country club bar. Like it just seems like a very apt setting for this.
Agreed. I think that would be a great place for it.
Yeah, and it would be even better if it's at an outdoor theater, potentially one with a pool. This is a very high budget production, but you know what? This is our dreams, Katie.
Julia said, let's take the set of High School Musical 2 and let's put Much Ado About Nothing on top of it.
I didn't even think about that, but that's completely accurate. And I want Kenny Ortega to choreograph. There, I said it.
That's it. We're about to take this to market. Let's see who wants a piece of this production.
I love it.
That's so funny.
So we know that Kenny Ortega is going to choreograph. What is your dream cast? I need to know.
I am so excited about my dream cast. I've come up with more people for this Dreamcast than literally any other thing we've talked about yet because I'm so passionate about every single person and every role that I'm about to say.
I love it.
I have two choices for Beatrice, and this was the first person that came to me. Annie Murphy as Beatrice.
Stop.
Annie
my
Murphy.
God, that's perfect.
Is the actress on Schitt's Creek, who plays oh my God, what's her name?
Alexis.
Alexis.
A little bit Alexis.
A little bit Alexis. It's embarrassing that I've watched that show 1,000 times and couldn't remember the character's name.
You told me to watch that show. You were the reason I watched it.
I love Schitt's Creek. Annie Murphy would be brilliant, but I also think Natasha Lyonne would be brilliant in this role. If you wanted to go like a little more like risque, Natasha Lyonne is the choice for that Beatrice.
That is such a good idea.
My Benedict, preferably, I think he would work best with Annie Murphy, is David Diggs.
I love David Diggs.
I want to see David Diggs because he's got such a good use on language because he's a rapper and he knows how to use that language to like really just steer the show, and your Benedict has to steer the show. Like, they just have to.
He can spit verse like nobody's business.
He really can. And this one would not work now, but young, I want you to think young.
Okay.
Alan Cumming.
I love him so much.
Julia's voice quivered.
When I watched Cabaret for the first time, it awakened something in me.
Me too. Me too. Alan Cumming.
I love him so much. Okay,
that's what I'm gonna say.
Him and Natasha Lyonne, stop.
Yeah. Oh, I know. My hero, I've got two for hero, and it's Erica Henningsen and Jessie Mueller.
You went very Broadway with this, and
very
I adore.
Broadway. I did. I went very Broadway with this one, because I think that I'm going more based off of like stock images, like stock characters, and like and that's the thing, like I could see Erica Henningsen paired really well with Natasha Lyonne and Jessie Mueller paired very well with Annie Murphy. I don't think that I would want to see Annie Murphy and Erica Henningsen together because they're too similar, and same with Natasha and Jessie. But the two opposite each other, I think, could like really just be, again, like opposites driving that home, because that's just something I think would work really well in this one.
Yeah.
Very passionate about my two Claudios, and that is Jake Epstein and James Marsden.
I love James Marsden.
I know you love James Marsden, but he would be fantastic.
I would love to see a show where he gets the girl, because he never does. He's always the other man.
I know. I want to see him get the girl. I'm with you. He's a sexy man.
Yeah. Him and David Denman, they are constantly just the other man.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then these last two are this one is in all caps, so clearly I feel very passionate about this one. But both of these are a little abstract if you don't know who they are. But I went to Team Star Kid is who I turned my attention to here for these last two. Team Star Kid was a theater company that was created, I want to say in 2009. I could be wrong. It might have been 2011.
Well, 2009 is when A Very Potter Musical came out.
Oh, maybe it was earlier than that. 2008, maybe. Of a bunch of students from the University of Michigan who graduated together, formed this theater company, and then came up with a bunch of parody musicals, their most famous being A Very Potter Musical. But they've come up with a ton. Julia and I are Star Kid fanatics. My roommate and best friend Caroline as well, Star Kid fanatic. We love them. Noelle, who we mentioned earlier,
many times.
We all love them. So these last two are Star Kid actors. Don John, my favorite character. Who would I want to see play Don John, Julia?
It's either Joey Richter or it is the love of your life. His name is escaping me. Dear God.
It is Joe Walker that I want to see play Don John.
I was going to say. Okay.
I think you were going to say Dylan Saunders.
I was going to say Dylan Saunders.
Who is my choice for Don Pedro. But Don John.
He's in there.
He's in there, don't worry. But Don John as Joe Walker, because, again, those Mojo Jojo vibes, I'm feeling very Voldemort from A Very Potter Musical, so I'm feeling very Joe Walker.
I love that choice.
And Don Pedro is the one that's like a little bit more mature and blah, 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 blah. And I just feel like Dylan Saunders would be good for that one.
That's fantastic.
What about you? What is your dream cast in your dream High School Musical too?
You went very Broadway. I went very film.
Yes, let's see it.
More TV, honestly. Like, everyone who's gonna listen to this and be like, wow, she's watched a lot of Game of Thrones and Community. Okay, here we go.
Let's see if I know any of these actors.
Yes. So, starting off with the love of my life, I did this very based on pairings. Mm-hmm. So, for Benedict and Beatrice, Donald Glover and Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Because Phoebe Waller-Bridge is an icon and a queen, and Donald Glover is the love of my life, as we have stated before.
She would be great in that role.
Wouldn't she be so good?
She would be really good in that role.
So that's my first idea. They were the first people that came to my mind. And then I hopped over to Game of Thrones land, and I was like, oh, if Nikolai Coster-Waldau and Gwendolyn Christie were like 10 years younger, booked. Just because of the, comedic and romantic tension between those two as Jamie and Brienne. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, oh, Game of Thrones, Pedro Pascal as Benedict.
Oh, stop.
And I was like, who would pair really well with him? Tiana Paris, who, if you don't know her, she was in Mad Men, I believe, but she just became like really popular because of WandaVision. Okay. She plays Monica Rambeau in that.
I haven't seen that yet, but it's on my list. Okay. Well, I love that pair.
Those are my three main pairings. And then for Hero and Claudio, once again, I did pairings. Mm-hmm. Well, kind of. So I was thinking Naomi Scott. Mm-hmm. And I want her paired with Alfie Enoch from Harry Potter and How to Get Away with Murder. Another one of just my major Hollywood crushes. I adore him. And then Lana Condor as Hero, paired with Jordan Fisher. Do you know Lana Condor?
I don't know. I do know Jordan Fisher.
Love Jordan
And I think that's great. That's a great choice.
He was in To All the Boys I've Loved Before, the second one, with her. She plays Laura Jean.
Oh, okay.
And she's adorable, and she's just like really quirky and cute and sweet. And I was like, oh, Hero could be just so cute. And
yeah.
And then as I was on the Naomi Scott train, I was like, oh, but like Ella Balinska from Charlie's Angels would be really cute as Hero as well.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
So I'd especially want to see her paired with, if Tiana was Beatrice, I'd want her to be Hero.
Yeah.
And then, I didn't have a pair for her. I'd say she'd probably be with like Elfie or Jordan. I'd be happy with either one. Because the reason I chose those two, I was like, they both have such a sweet side, but like I can see them getting really pissed off if someone wronged them. So like,
right.
But they have to be sweet enough that people aren't like, oh, I hate Claudio. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, especially because so much of the play is focused on Beatrice and Benedict, because their relationship is so like hard from the beginning, whereas like Claudio and Hero are like, I love you too, oh my god, like they're very Shakespearean lovers, so most of the attention really has to be on that Beatrice and Benedict. So I agree.
Yeah, and they all gotta be hot.
Moral of this country club. Honestly, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who's who as long as they're all hot. I'm kidding.
Then for Dogberry, I had a very specific person come to mind. This is where the Community fans are gonna be like, yeah, Julia, I want Danny Pudi to play this role with every fiber of my being.
I don't know who that is.
Look him up. He's on DuckTales and Community. He's one of the funniest men alive. He recently went viral because he was doing an interview, I think, with Larry King, and Larry King was like, what's your favorite luxury item? And he's like, oh, I really like socks. And he's like, no, I'm talking like private jet, private plane. And he's like, Larry, I'm on DuckTales.
That was a TikTok, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To all of you youngins, I don't have TikTok yet, but I'm gonna get it. and it's gonna be fine, but I don't have it, and I haven't had it, and people keep sending me TikToks. And that was one of the ones that I saw. It was like, Larry, I'm on DuckTales.
Larry, I'm on DuckTales, so I want him to play Dogberry. And if I couldn't get him, I'd love to get, you probably won't know this guy, but Danny Jollis, he was in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and he plays a character named George. He's a very talented stand-up comedian.
Nice.
And I mean, ideally, I'd have both Dannys. I'd have Danny Pudi as Dogberry and then Danny Jollis as Verges. And they would be like the comedic duo, which is funny because one of them's super tall and one of them's super short. So
right. Just like the last episode in The Great Leap, we'll just have them like flip a coin or something at the beginning and see who's gonna be who each night. I love that idea. Absolutely love that idea.
I'm obsessed with that. Oh, it's like whoever can like take a shot first. I don't know.
Whoever shotguns the beer first.
Yeah. And then last but not least, for Don Pedro or Leonardo, I would just love Peter Dinklage to be involved in this. Peter Dinklage is one of the most talented actors in the world, as far as I'm concerned.
Good.
He's so talented. I had to remind myself that he is, in fact, American and not British, because after watching Game of Thrones, I was like, I could listen to this man talk for the rest of my life and never get bored. I want him to narrate my life story. I think it's the way he pronounces things with, like, T's and B's that just really, like... But I need to hear the man do Shakespeare, and... I need him to be involved.
Yeah, you know, like, I feel like that's kind of what it all comes down to, is just, like, a lot of these people, I don't know if they've ever done Shakespeare. Like, some of them, I think, maybe. I would assume, like, I would assume that Alan Cumming has done Shakespeare. I
mean, if Gwendolyn Christie hasn't done Shakespeare, that's a shame, because her voice, once again, like, I could listen to her narrate my life story. Honestly, if she said my name, I'd cry. If she said my name aloud, I would just...
It would just be the end of it. Yeah. Well, Julia, I would like to know what your calls to action are from this wonderful April Fool's-ish episode that we have. What your lovely calls to action from this goofy show are.
This one was hard. It's always hard to find a call to action from a comedy. But I think it's really just what I say anytime I watch a Shakespeare. There was a meme going around a while ago that was like Shakespeare being like, I'm gonna make a misunderstanding. That's so complicated that it'll last 2.5 hours. And I think the biggest call to action I have is communicate, people. If you have feelings for someone, communicate with them. If you think they have wronged you, text them and be like, hey, did you do this?
Hey, why have you wronged me?
And believe me, I am the pot calling the kettle Julia Marie Black because I hate conflict. Katie can attest. You could pour hot soup in my lap and I would apologize to you, as John Mulaney once said. I hate conflict, but sometimes it needs to be done, and sometimes things need to be addressed. And if you think that your wife-to-be is, like, sleeping around, just text her.
Shoot her a cute little midnight text.
If you think your girlfriend is dead because she drank some poison, just, like, double check before you decide to off yourself as well. Just hot tip from Shakespeare, communicate.
That's the best call to action I could have ever imagined for this specific episode. You're right. That didn't even cross my mind. Communication, man.
Communicate.
These plays are riddled with no communication.
And I think going off of that, don't get involved in other people's relationships. As much as funny as it is to watch Beatrice and Benedict fall in love, they would have come around to it eventually if they were meant to be. You don't have to, get all involved and mess with their feelings. Once again, pot calling the kettle Julia Marie Black. But anyway, I used to be that friend who, like, if my best friend had like a 4th grade boyfriend, she'd be like, give him this note, and I'd be like, I'm secretly in love with him, but I will deliver this note out of duty.
Yes. Yeah.
But Yeah, so communicate and just leave the drama on stage, my friends.
Save the drama for on the stage. I love that. That's a great one.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
What about you?
I have 2 calls to action. My first is a call to action to myself, and the other is a call to action to everybody. Mainly to myself, but everybody. The first one is to continue studying Shakespeare. I think that I am somebody, again, I'm going to get a little bit personal, but up until I was a junior in college, I hated Shakespeare.
With a passion.
Like, I think hated is an understatement. I loathed Shakespeare. And the first and foremost reason being that, I think I'm a smart person. Just as a human being thank you.
You are a
thank you. Going about the world. I'd like to think I've got a pretty good head on my shoulders, but especially as an actor, there is nothing I pride myself more than being a smart actor. Because I want to be a teacher, so I want to learn everything about acting. Everything I can possibly learn about acting. And Shakespeare makes me feel so stupid because I don't know what's going on ever. It's because of the way that it's written. I don't know how to dissect it. I got a full-ass degree in theater, in acting, in studying plays, and I get so frustrated by his plays because, again, like I said, I'm a slow reader. It takes me a while. And, I think it's the exact reason why Shakespeare has become something that I love so much. Because after learning the things that go into it that you don't know, such as iambic pentameter and why it is what it is, the use of opposites, the use of alliterations, the use of punctuation, the use of, wordplay, of making a word that's long, saying it long, things like that. Those are the types of things that you don't know from an outside perspective, and why would you? Because it's not in the study of Shakespeare, especially in the high school study of Shakespeare, it's not something you learn about. You read the play and that's it. You don't learn about why things are the way that they are, which can get very frustrating. So I think for me, it is all about, my call to action is all about just trying to not beat myself up, be proud of the progress that I've made in learning about Shakespeare, and then continuing to challenge myself to learn even more about Shakespeare and to learn more about his writing and his style, and taking away the things that I can from it, because when you act Shakespeare, it is fun to be an actor in a Shakespeare show. It is fun to have those words flow out of you and just not even know where they're coming from, but knowing what everything means. That's obviously what you do on stage no matter what text you have, but having such a complex text, it just, like you said, Julia, it makes that adrenaline just rush through you.
It can really help teach the fundamentals of acting in a lot of cases, because there's a great book, actually, we'll put on our Instagram after this drops, we'll put on a recommended reading list if you're really interested in this subject and you want to learn more. There's a really great book called Thinking Shakespeare. And the biggest thing that it talks about is the fact that there is no subtext in Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Characters say exactly what they are thinking, which makes your life so easy as an actor, because you never have to guess, what is my motivation? It's right there.
Right.
And
it might take you a hot second to figure out where that's the subtext that's right there is, because sometimes it comes on one specific word. Sometimes it's just a specific...
It's the aside, it's the double entendre.
Right, exactly. But they're all things that you learn, and like you said, Julie, there is no guessing, and it's perfect, because you just don't have to worry about that aspect of it. You just have to worry about taking what's right in front of you and, using it, And to quote Schitt's Creek, even though it's aggressively incorrect, and we're just talking about Schitt's Creek and whiskey tonight, Moira Rose has a lovely quote where she says that the script is just a jumping off point, which is so not true in anything, but especially not in Shakespeare. The script is everything in Shakespeare.
It is everything.
It's everything in Shakespeare.
But as an actor, it is a diving board, Because if you know the text and you fully understand it, you can make magic on that stage without trying.
Yes,
you just have to trust that you know that text and you know what it means.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like there are some times that you'll have a monologue and it'll end in tears, and there's sometimes you'll have it where it will end in just red hot anger, because there's room for all of it in there. But you have to trust that text.
100%. And that's why I think continuing the study of Shakespeare is imperative, really.
Yeah.
And my second call to action is to trust your heart. And this is the one that I said is for everybody, and it's also for me. But it might take you a little while to like find your heart, and I don't mean that in like a you're a heartless stone cold bitch kind of way. I mean that in more of like sometimes we're going through the daily trials and tribulations of life, and we're just going through the motions, and sometimes our head gets involved. I know it gets involved for me about 95% of the time, you know, and it just takes over everything. And sometimes it might take you a little while to like really go in your chest and like dig out that heart, because it's trapped behind all of this other stuff we're trying to deal with on the daily. But taking that and trusting that, and that means trusting my instincts and trusting my instincts about love in all ways. But it's, you know, my heart has never let me down, you know, even in the times that like, you know, you might think things are going south. I'm a very, you know, you learn from the things that have gone wrong in your life, and you grow from it, and things were meant to happen to you in your life for whatever reason, and taking that and saying that even all my heartbreak has happened for a reason. It has never let me down. My heart has pointed me exactly where I've needed to go every single step of the way, so why doubt her? You know, like, just let her do her thing. Trust the heart. Like you said, Julia, communicate, and things will hopefully fall into the place that they're supposed to, you know?
I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot. Our hearts are very resilient little machines.
Mm-hmm.
And there is so much beauty and love and lost and everything in between. And I know one of the biggest lessons I took from this whole year was, and it's a saying that I say quite frequently, is my heart is open and I'm ready for whatever comes my way. Because everything that you need is already in your toolbox, whether you realize it or not. And if you keep your heart open, and this doesn't apply to just romantic love, I know that's what this show deals with, but there are so many incredible types of familial love and platonic love and love of your work and love of humanity and all of that stuff. And the more you keep it open, the less the losses tend to hurt.
Yeah.
And if the loss does hurt, it means you cared. And that's just as good.
And that's beautiful. Yeah, there's definitely nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a little hurt. It's painful.
Everybody hurts.
As painful as it might be. Yeah. Perfect. Truly, you can sing us out of here. That'd be perfect.
No, I will not.
Well, would you like to instead tell everybody what they can expect from our next episode of Playdate?
Katie and I are so excited because in our next episode, we are going to have the incredible Brotakus podcast joining us to talk about a little play that probably a lot of you know called She Kills Monsters.
Great play. Hilarious.
Great play. We're going to have a nice little crossover episode. We're going to go join them over on their podcast, and they're going to join us on our podcast. It's going to be a really great time.
Yeah.
Noah and James are two of the coolest people in the whole wide world. So
yeah, we're very lucky we get to know them, and we'll be sure to link to their Spotify in our Instagram, so that you guys can take a listen to their wonderful show that we are both very excited to be on and both have them on. It's going to be an awesome, cool little thing.
It's going to be so fun. I'm so excited. Our month of April is just stacked with good times.
Yeah, it really is. We have a wonderful April. So thank you again for listening, and be sure to tune in a couple weeks for our next episode.
Yeah, and we'll give one last final shout out. We have a brand new sound engineer that has come on board to the Playdate team. So thank you, Aaron Fern, for being our sound engineer. Thanks for coming on.
You are incredible. You rock. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this week's Playdate.
You can follow us on Instagram at playdate.podcast for updates, giveaways, and more fun stuff.
Our cover art was designed by Levi Denton Hughes.
Our sound engineer is Aaron Fern.
And our theme music was composed and recorded by Mickey Wadsworth.
I'm Julia.
And I'm Kate.
Keep playing.